The alien perception of humans. The Galactic Concord was a vast and powerful coalition of interstellar species, each one bringing unique strengths to the Alliance. Some were known for their intellect, others for their physical prowess, and still others for their advanced technology. Among these species, humans were often seen as an anomaly, a curiosity rather than a threat. They lacked the scales of the draconian warriors, the psychic powers of the Xylarans, or the advanced nanotech integration of the Aetheri. To the alien scholars, humans were frail creatures, clumsy and limited. Yet, it was often said that the greatest danger was underestimating an unknown variable. Dr. Van Kaal, a Xylari scientist, had spent decades studying human biology and psychology. From his research, he concluded that humans were only dangerous because of their weapons. Remove those tools, and humans were no more threatening than a mewling scythe cub. His colleagues agreed, writing papers and holding conferences to discuss humanity's apparent mediocrity. It became accepted knowledge across the stars. Humans were weak without their guns, their tanks, and their ships. However, this consensus was about to be tested in the most unexpected way, an unlikely encounter. The Galactic Concord found itself embroiled in a skirmish near the uncharted sector of the Jaxar Nebula. A distress signal had been received from a research vessel conducting experiments on a rogue planet. The Concord's military, though formidable, was spread thin across multiple sectors, leaving them with no choice but to hire mercenaries to assist in the rescue mission. Among these hired guns was a human, a man named Captain Bryce. Bryce was not what the aliens had expected. He arrived wearing simple, worn combat gear, carrying a duffel bag filled with seemingly mundane items. The other mercenaries, a mix of hulking draconians and agile Aetheri, sneered at his lack of high-tech weaponry. They dismissed him as an eccentric, a relic from a primitive world. Bryce didn't seem to mind. He simply smiled, his sharp green eyes scanning the alien landscape with an almost predatory curiosity. The rescue mission was simple in theory: infiltrate the planet, locate the stranded scientists, and extract them before the hostile predators overwhelmed the team. The planet, known as Kranth 7, was infamous for its aggressive native wildlife, including creatures with razor-sharp claws and venomous fangs. The Concord soldiers and mercenaries loaded their energy rifles and activated their personal shields, their confidence bolstered by the best technology in the galaxy. Bryce, meanwhile, opened his duffel bag and pulled out a coil of paracord, a roll of duct tape, a metal canister, and a pack of chewing gum. The other mercenaries stared at him in disbelief. "What are you planning to do with that?" sneered Jurak, a towering draconian with scales like molten steel. "Tie the predators up and hope they surrender." Bryce grinned. "Something like that." The first test. The team descended onto Kranth 7's surface, the air thick with humidity and the distant cries of alien beasts echoing through the jungle. Within minutes, they encountered their first challenge, a pack of six-legged predators with jaws that could crush steel. The alien mercenaries opened fire with their energy weapons, but the creatures were fast, darting between trees and leaping from unexpected angles. The advanced rifles overheated quickly, leaving the team vulnerable. It was in this moment of chaos that Bryce sprang into action. He grabbed his paracord and duct tape, tying knots with astonishing speed and precision. He positioned himself near a narrow path, using the dense foliage to conceal his movements. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he tossed the makeshift trap into the air. The cord snapped into place, creating a web-like snare that caught one of the predators mid-leap. The creature thrashed wildly, but the more it struggled, the tighter the trap became. Bryce didn't stop there. He took the metal canister, filled it with a volatile chemical he had extracted from a nearby plant, and sealed it with duct tape. With a quick flick of his lighter, he lit the fuse and hurled the makeshift explosive toward the pack. The resulting blast was not as powerful as an energy grenade, but it was enough to scatter the predators, buying the team precious time to regroup. The aliens stared at Bryce, their disbelief palpable. "You used jungle plants and tape to make a bomb?" asked Lyra, an aethery with translucent skin and a voice like wind chimes. "Yep," Bryce said casually, brushing dirt off his hands. "Sometimes you've got to work with what you've got." A newfound respect. As the team pressed deeper into the jungle, Bryce continued to demonstrate his resourcefulness. When their advanced mapping drones malfunctioned due to electromagnetic interference, he used simple chalk and a compass to create a reliable map. When a draconian's leg was injured by a venomous insect, Bryce fashioned a makeshift splint using tree bark and vines, then neutralized the venom with an antidote he brewed from local flora. The aliens began to see Bryce in a new light. His methods were unconventional, even primitive by their standards, but they were undeniably effective. He didn't rely on technology or brute force. He relied on his wits, his creativity, and his deep understanding of the environment. The turning point. The final test came when the team reached the research facility, only to find it overrun by a massive swarm of flying predators. The creatures had built nests in the facility's structures, making it impossible to approach without being attacked. The Concord soldiers hesitated, their weapons useless against the swarm's sheer numbers. Bryce, however, had a plan. He used the chewing gum to patch a leak in one of the facility's fuel lines, then rigged the fuel tank to release a steady stream of vapor. Next, he crafted a rudimentary torch using a metal rod and a piece of cloth soaked in the volatile chemical. With precise timing, he ignited the vapor, creating a controlled explosion that sent a shockwave through the swarm. The creatures scattered, leaving the facility temporarily clear. The team entered the facility, rescued the scientists, and extracted safely. As they boarded their ship, the Concord commander turned to Bryce with an expression that could only be described as awe. "You've changed how we see humans," the commander admitted. "We thought you were weak without your weapons. Now we understand. Everything you touch becomes a weapon." Bryce shrugged, his smile as unassuming as ever. "That's just how we roll." The legend of Captain Bryce and his ingenious methods spread quickly, earning him the nickname, the Human Arsenal. For the Galactic Concord, it was a humbling reminder that humans were far more dangerous than they had ever imagined, not because of their technology, but because of their limitless creativity and adaptability. A human's ingenious improvisation. As the Galactic Concord rescue team prepared for their departure from the infested research facility on Cranth 7, the aliens couldn't stop discussing Captain Bryce's unprecedented ingenuity. His ability to craft deadly solutions out of seemingly mundane objects had not only saved their lives, but also shattered their preconceived notions of human capabilities. Yet, Bryce himself seemed unfazed, as if his actions were routine. What the team didn't realize was that their adventure was far from over. The planet itself was determined to challenge their survival, and Bryce would once again have to prove why humans were regarded as the galaxy's most resourceful beings. The ambush in the ravine. The extraction ship was waiting several kilometers away, beyond a jagged ravine that cut through the dense jungle like a scar. The team had little choice but to traverse the ravine, a natural choke point that left them exposed to the planet's predatory wildlife. As they began their descent into the rocky terrain, the air grew colder and the vegetation thinned, leaving only eerie silence. It was too quiet. "Something feels wrong," murmured Lyra, the ethery scout. Her translucent skin shimmered as she scanned the surroundings with her enhanced vision. Bryce tightened his grip on the mesh sheet he had scavenged from the research facility. "Stay close and keep your eyes peeled," he said, his voice calm but firm. He had learned to trust his gut instincts, and right now, they were screaming at him. The ambush came suddenly. From the shadows of the ravine, a pack of Cranthian night stalkers emerged, massive, wolf-like creatures with jet-black fur and glowing red eyes. Their claws scraped against the rocks as they surrounded the team, growling with predatory hunger. The alien soldiers immediately raised their energy rifles, but the creatures were too fast, darting between rocks and attacking from multiple angles. Bryce, however, didn't waste time relying on tech that had already proven unreliable in Krath 7's electromagnetic environment. Instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out a handful of sharp metal shards, debris he had salvaged earlier. "Cover me," he shouted as he darted to a higher vantage point on the rocky slope. The aliens hesitated, stunned by his apparent recklessness, but quickly realized he had a plan. Improvised weapons in action. From his elevated position, Bryce began launching the shards with pinpoint accuracy. His throws weren't random. He aimed for the Night Stalker's vulnerable spots, their glowing eyes and soft underbellies. One by one, the creatures recoiled, blinded or wounded by the makeshift projectiles. But the Night Stalkers weren't the only threat. As Bryce provided cover, a new danger emerged. A massive alpha predator, twice the size of the others, appeared at the edge of the ravine. Its roar echoed through the canyon, shaking loose stones and sending a wave of fear through the team. Bryce glanced down at the alien soldiers, who were struggling to hold their formation. "Time for Plan B," he muttered to himself. From his utility belt, he pulled out a simple metal flask filled with a volatile chemical he had extracted from a native plant. He attached a strip of cloth to the flask's opening, creating a rudimentary Molotov cocktail. Using a lighter, a primitive tool by Galactic standards, he ignited the cloth and hurled the flask at the alpha predator. The explosion wasn't massive, but it was effective. The alpha roared in pain as flames licked at its fur, causing the rest of the pack to scatter. The team took the opportunity to regroup and press forward. A bridge of vines. The team's path led them to a sheer cliff face, where a natural stone bridge once stood but had long since collapsed. The only way across was to construct a makeshift bridge, but time was running out. The Night Stalkers were regrouping, and their howls echoed closer with each passing moment. Bryce assessed the situation quickly. He spotted a cluster of thick, vine-like plants growing along the cliff edge, plants he had earlier identified as being incredibly strong and flexible. Without hesitation, he began cutting the vines and weaving them together into a rope bridge. The aliens watched in awe as Bryce worked with incredible speed and precision. His hands moved like a craftsman's, tying knots and securing the bridge with techniques that seemed second nature to him. When he was done, he tested the bridge by throwing a heavy rock across it. Satisfied with its stability, he turned to the team. "Move now," he ordered. The aliens hesitated, their skepticism evident. "This doesn't look safe," muttered Jarak, the burly draconian. "It's safer than staying here and becoming dinner," Bryce retorted. His tone left no room for argument. One by one, the team crossed the vine bridge, their nerves frayed as it swayed under their weight. Bryce was the last to cross, cutting the bridge behind him to prevent the Night Stalkers from following. The hidden danger. Just as the team thought they were safe, they encountered a new obstacle, a hidden swamp that reeked of sulfur and bubbled ominously. The ground was unstable, and stepping in the wrong spot could mean sinking into toxic quicksand. To make matters worse, strange, insect-like creatures buzzed above the swamp, their stingers glowing with bioluminescent venom. Bryce knelt down and studied the swamp. He noticed a pattern in the bubbling. Certain areas were less active than others. Using a long stick, he probed the ground, marking a safe path with stones. "This way," he instructed, leading the team with deliberate caution. The insects, however, began swarming, attracted by the movement. Bryce acted quickly, lighting a bundle of dried plants he had collected earlier. The smoke created a makeshift repellent, driving the insects back and giving the team enough time to cross the swamp safely. A newfound respect. By the time the team reached the extraction point, they were battered, exhausted, and silent. The extraction ship hovered above, lowering a ramp to bring them aboard. As the aliens boarded, they cast glances at Bryce. Glances that were no longer dismissive but filled with a mix of respect and awe. Once everyone was aboard, the Concord commander turned to Bryce. "I have to admit, human, we underestimated you." Bryce smirked, leaning back against the bulkhead. "You're not the first to make that mistake. But hey, now you've got a story to tell." The legend grows. As the extraction ship ascended, Bryce's exploits began to spread among the crew. The aliens, once skeptical, now spoke of him with admiration. They had witnessed firsthand what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. Bryce had shown them that true strength wasn't about physical prowess or advanced technology. It was about adaptability, ingenuity, and the will to survive. But for Bryce, it was just another day. As he cleaned the dirt off his hands, he couldn't help but wonder what other challenges the galaxy had in store. Whatever they were, he knew one thing for certain: he'd be ready. Turning nature into arsenal, the Galactic Concord rescue team, though relieved to have made it past the ravine and swamp, knew their journey wasn't over. Captain Bryce, the human mercenary whose quick thinking and resourcefulness had saved them time and again, was already scanning the dense jungle ahead for their next challenge. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified by the thick, oppressive air. On Kranth 7, nature itself was the greatest enemy, and Bryce was about to show his team how to turn it into their greatest ally. A jungle of hidden threats. The jungle before them was unlike anything the Concord team had encountered on their homeworlds. Towering trees with bioluminescent vines cast an eerie, greenish glow over the forest floor. Strange plants hissed as they exhaled clouds of spores, and the ground beneath their boots squelched ominously with every step. Above them, creatures with leathery wings circled, their screeches echoing like a warning. "We need to move quickly," said Lyra, the ethery scout, her translucent skin shimmering with unease. "This place feels alive." "It is," Bryce replied, crouching to examine a cluster of spiny plants. "And it's smarter than it looks." He reached out carefully with a gloved hand, plucking one of the plant's thorns, holding it up to the light. He studied its structure, a natural barb tipped with a viscous amber liquid. He dipped the tip into a piece of cloth and watched as the fabric hissed and dissolved. "Poison," Bryce said with a smirk. "We'll keep that in mind." Setting the first trap. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, Bryce's instincts told him they were being followed. The team was too large, too noisy to go unnoticed for long. He motioned for them to stop and scan the area, his sharp eyes catching a faint movement in the underbrush. "Predators," he muttered. "They'd been trailing us since the swamp." The Concord soldiers tightened their grips on their malfunctioning energy rifles, but Bryce shook his head. "Save your ammo. I've got a better idea." He motioned for the team to spread out while he gathered supplies. Using the spiny plants he had examined earlier, Bryce crafted a series of rudimentary caltrops, small jagged devices designed to injure and slow anything that stepped on them. He scattered them across the jungle floor in a narrow corridor, ensuring they were concealed by fallen leaves. Next, he used the vines hanging from the trees to rig a series of tripwires. These, in turn, were connected to clusters of large, hollow fruits he had found. Inside the fruits, he had placed a mixture of the plant's toxic spores and a reactive sap that would explode on impact. It wasn't elegant, but it would do the job. "Everyone, move to higher ground," Bryce instructed, leading the team to a rocky outcrop overlooking the trap. They waited in silence, the tension thick as the jungle around them. Minutes later, the predators emerged, sleek, feline-like creatures with razor-sharp claws and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They moved with predatory grace, their movements almost silent as they approached the trap. The first creature stepped on a caltrop, letting out a pained yelp as it stumbled back. This triggered a chain reaction. The tripwires activated, sending the toxic fruit bombs crashing down on the pack. The resulting chaos was both horrifying and awe-inspiring. The predators, confused and injured, retreated into the jungle, leaving the team unscathed. Harnessing the jungle's resources, with the immediate threat neutralized, Bryce turned his attention to their next challenge: finding food and clean water. The alien soldiers, reliant on their ration packs, were beginning to show signs of fatigue. Bryce, however, was in his element. He led the team to a grove of trees with bulbous, fruit-like growths. "These are safe," he said, slicing one open to reveal a juicy, nutrient-rich interior. "High in sugar and water content. Eat sparingly, too much, and you'll get a stomachache." He also demonstrated how to extract water from the vines, slicing them at an angle and holding a container beneath the dripping liquid. The aliens watched in amazement as Bryce used his knowledge of the environment to provide for the team's needs. But Bryce wasn't just gathering supplies. He was also preparing for their next encounter. He showed the team how to create rudimentary slingshots using flexible branches and strips of vine. For ammunition, he used the hard, round seeds from the fruit, which could be hurled with surprising force. "Not as good as a rifle," Bryce admitted, "but better than nothing." The Sentinel Beasts. As the team continued their journey, they encountered a new obstacle. A group of massive quadrupedal creatures that appeared to be guarding a narrow pass through the jungle. The beasts were covered in thick, armored plates, and their long spiked tails could easily shatter bones. They showed no signs of aggression, but they blocked the only viable path forward. "We can't fight them," said Jurak, the draconian warrior. "Our weapons are useless against that armor." "We don't need to fight," Bryce replied. "We just need to think." He studied the creatures for a moment, noting their behavior. They were grazing on a particular type of moss that grew along the rocks, their movements slow and deliberate. Bryce's eyes narrowed as he formulated a plan. He directed the team to collect the moss and spread it along a different path, leading away from the pass. The creatures, drawn by the scent, followed the trail, leaving the pass unguarded. The team moved quickly and quietly, their respect for Bryce growing with each passing moment. The human arsenal. By the time the team reached the edge of the jungle, they had transformed from a disorganized group of soldiers into a cohesive unit, thanks to Bryce's leadership. They had learned to see the environment not as an enemy, but as a resource, a lesson that had saved their lives more than once. Bryce, however, remained humble. To him, this was simply what humans did. "We adapt," he told the team. "That's what makes us dangerous. We don't need fancy weapons or advanced tech. We just need our wits and whatever's lying around." The aliens nodded, their expressions a mix of awe and gratitude. They had come to Kranth 7 with preconceived notions about humans, but those notions had been shattered. Bryce had shown them that true strength came from creativity, adaptability, and the will to survive. A new chapter. As the team prepared to leave the jungle, Bryce paused to take one last look at the dense alien landscape. He felt a strange sense of kinship with the planet. It was wild, unpredictable, and relentless, just like humanity. "Let's move," he said, his voice steady. "We've got a long way to go." The team followed him without hesitation, their trust in the human mercenary absolute. They knew that as long as Bryce was leading them, they had a fighting chance, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The Galactic Arena, where humans shine. News of the team's survival on Kranth 7 had already begun to spread across the Galactic Concord, sparking debates and intrigue among the many species of the Coalition. While the Concord soldiers and alien scientists marveled at Captain Bryce's ingenuity, others were more skeptical. Rumors reached the ears of the leaders of the Galactic Arena, an ancient and revered institution where the galaxy's greatest warriors competed to prove their strength. For centuries, the arena had served as a testing ground, a stage where might and technology reigned supreme. The arena's overseers, a proud race called the Zithari, were unimpressed by the stories of a human using tricks and improvised tools to survive. To them, such methods were an insult to the pure art of combat. They extended an invitation, more of a challenge, to Bryce, daring him to prove his worth in the Galactic Arena. For Bryce, it was an opportunity he couldn't resist. "I guess it's time to show them what humans can really do," he said with a sly grin. Arrival at the arena. The Galactic Arena was a marvel of engineering, a colossal structure orbiting a dying star. Its exterior shimmered with reflective plating, while the interior was a labyrinth of chambers, training grounds, and, at its heart, the massive combat ring where the galaxy's greatest warriors clashed. Bryce stepped off the transport ship, his boots echoing against the polished floor. The air buzzed with anticipation as spectators, beings of all shapes and sizes, filled the observation decks, eager to see what this human could do. He was escorted to the preparation chamber, where other combatants were gearing up. Hulking draconian warriors flexed their claws, ethery strategists adjusted their energy shields, and the insectoid car sharpened their serrated appendages. Bryce, in stark contrast, carried nothing but a small satchel filled with ordinary items: rope, a multi-tool, a few scraps of metal, and a worn lighter. "You're joking, right?" sneered one of the draconians, towering over Bryce. "You're going to fight in the arena with that?" Bryce shrugged, his expression calm. "It's not about what you bring. It's about how you use it." The first challenge, a test of wit. The arena's overseers prided themselves on creating challenges that tested not only strength, but also strategy and resourcefulness. Bryce's first test was a gauntlet, a sprawling maze filled with traps, automated drones, and hostile alien creatures. The objective was simple: reach the center before the others. The other contestants charged into the maze, relying on brute force to smash through obstacles and eliminate threats. Bryce, however, approached the challenge differently. He studied the entrance, noting the faint markings on the walls and the slight vibrations beneath his feet. "This maze is alive," he muttered to himself. He pulled out a small spool of thread from his satchel and began unspooling it as he moved, creating a trail to avoid getting lost. When he encountered a swarm of hovering drones, he used a reflective shard of metal to redirect their targeting lasers, causing them to destroy each other. At one point, he came across a collapsed section of the maze, with no obvious way forward. Bryce crafted a makeshift grappling hook using his rope and a sharp piece of debris. With precision and strength, he scaled the wall and continued on his path. By the time he reached the center, the other contestants were still struggling to navigate the maze. The crowd erupted in cheers and astonishment, their skepticism about the human beginning to waver. The second challenge: combat without weapons. For the second round, the contestants were stripped of their weapons and armor, placed in an open arena, and pitted against one another in a free-for-all. The Zithari overseers watched closely, eager to see how Bryce would fare without his tools. As the round began, the other combatants immediately targeted Bryce, viewing him as the weakest link. A draconian lunged at him, claws extended, but Bryce sidestepped with agility, grabbing a handful of sand from the arena floor and flinging it into the draconian's eyes. Blinded and enraged, the draconian stumbled, allowing Bryce to trip him with a well-placed kick. An aethery strategist attempted to use telekinetic force to hurl debris at Bryce, but he countered by using the same reflective shard from the maze to create a blinding light, disrupting the aethery's focus. One by one, Bryce outmaneuvered his opponents, using their own aggression and overconfidence against them. The final moment came when Bryce faced off against a towering Qatar warrior. The insectoid's serrated limbs gleamed as it charged, clicking menacingly. Bryce, seemingly unarmed, reached into his satchel and pulled out a length of rope. With deft movements, he lured the Qatar into a trap, entangling its limbs and forcing it to the ground. The crowd erupted once more, their initial doubt replaced by awe. The final duel: Bryce versus the champion. Having proven himself in the preliminary rounds, Bryce earned a spot in the final duel against the reigning champion, a Zithari warrior named Kaltor. Kaltor was a legend in the arena, known for his mastery of energy blades and his impenetrable combat shield. The duel was set to take place in the arena's main chamber, a circular battlefield surrounded by roaring spectators. As the duel began, Kaltor activated his energy blades, their plasma edges humming ominously. Bryce, in contrast, stood calmly, his hands resting at his sides. He had spent the previous night studying the arena's layout, noting the subtle air currents and reflective surfaces. Kaltor attacked first, swinging his blades with precision. Bryce dodged nimbly, his movements calculated. He led the Zithari toward a cluster of reflective pillars, using them to create a dazzling array of lights that disoriented Kaltor. In the chaos, Bryce reached into his satchel and pulled out his final tool, a makeshift slingshot crafted from a branch and a strip of cloth. Using small metal spheres as ammunition, he aimed for Kaltor's combat shield, striking its power source. Sparks flew as the shield short-circuited, leaving the champion vulnerable. The final blow came not from brute force, but from strategy. Bryce used the slingshot to trigger a release mechanism on the arena's ceiling, causing a cascade of debris to fall. Kaltor, overwhelmed, conceded defeat, the legacy of the human challenger. As the crowd erupted in a deafening roar, Bryce stood at the center of the arena, his calm demeanor unchanged. The Zithari overseers, though reluctant to admit it, acknowledged his victory. "This human," one of them declared, "has redefined what it means to be a warrior. Strength alone is meaningless without ingenuity." Bryce simply smiled, raising a hand in acknowledgement. For him, the victory wasn't about proving himself to the galaxy. It was about demonstrating what humanity was truly capable of. In the galactic arena, where technology and brute force had always reigned supreme, a lone human with nothing but his wits had emerged as the victor. Facing an alien general, Captain Bryce's unexpected victory in the galactic arena had rippled across the galaxy, leaving many in awe and others in disbelief. For the Galactic Concord, Bryce's triumph was a testament to humanity's ingenuity and adaptability. But not everyone was impressed. Among the skeptics was General Zorvek, a renowned military tactician and war hero from the Zithari race. The general viewed Bryce's success as an insult to the traditions of combat and the legacy of the galactic arena. Determined to prove that Bryce's victories were mere flukes, Zorvek issued a challenge, a one-on-one duel. This was no ordinary match. It would take place on a battlefield chosen by the general, with no weapons allowed. It was a contest of pure survival, cunning, and willpower. Bryce, ever the strategist, accepted the challenge with a confident smirk. The battlefield of shadows. The chosen battlefield was a desolate moon orbiting a dying star, known as Shatten 9. Its surface was a labyrinth of jagged rocks, deep crevices, and eerie, glowing fissures. The moon's thin atmosphere shimmered with electromagnetic disturbances, rendering advanced technology useless. It was a place where only the strongest and most resourceful could survive. Bryce arrived on the barren surface with nothing but his standard-issue combat suit and his trusted satchel of everyday items. Across the field, General Zorvek stood tall, his shimmering, silver-scaled armor glinting in the pale light of the star. The Zithari general carried no weapons, relying instead on his immense physical strength and centuries of battle-hardened experience. A holographic announcer appeared, its voice booming across the desolate landscape. "Combatants, the rules are simple. Survive, adapt, and eliminate your opponent. Begin." The game of cat and mouse. The duel began with Zorvek charging forward, his massive frame moving with surprising speed and precision. Bryce, well aware of the general's strength, didn't engage directly. Instead, he darted into the maze of rocks, using the terrain to his advantage. Zorvek's claws scraped against the jagged stones as he pursued, his frustration growing with every missed strike. Bryce's first move was to study the environment. He noticed that the glowing fissures emitted bursts of superheated gas at irregular intervals. Using a shard of reflective metal from his satchel, he angled the light from the fissures to create temporary blind spots, forcing Zorvek to slow down and recalibrate his approach. As Bryce ran, he began collecting materials, shards of rock, bits of metallic ore, and strands of fibrous plant material that clung to the crevices. He didn't stop moving, weaving through the maze with the agility of a predator stalking its prey. Zorvek, meanwhile, grew more aggressive, smashing through obstacles in his path. The first counterattack. When Zorvek finally cornered Bryce near a cluster of jagged rocks, the human seemed to have nowhere to run. The general smirked, confident that his prey was trapped. But Bryce had other plans. Reaching into his satchel, Bryce pulled out a makeshift sling he had crafted using the fibrous plant material. He loaded it with a sharp piece of metallic ore and launched it with precision. The projectile struck Zorvek's shoulder, causing the general to stumble back in surprise. It wasn't enough to injure him significantly, but it was enough to prove a point. Bryce wasn't defenseless. Bryce used the distraction to escape, retreating deeper into the maze. He knew that a direct confrontation with Zorvek would be suicide. Instead, he focused on setting traps and using the environment to wear the general down. The web of traps. Over the next hour, Bryce transformed the battlefield into a deadly playground. He used the glowing fissures to create pockets of heat traps, luring Zorvek into areas where the bursts of gas would slow him down. He rigged a series of tripwires using the fibrous plant material, each one connected to sharp shards of rock that would fall from above. Zorvek, though powerful, began to show signs of frustration and fatigue. His relentless pursuit was met with setback after setback, as Bryce's traps forced him to expend energy and remain on high alert. The turning point came when Zorvek stepped into a carefully constructed trap, a pit concealed with loose rocks and sand. As the general fell, Bryce appeared above him, holding a makeshift spear crafted from a sturdy branch and a shard of metallic ore. He didn't strike immediately, however. Instead, he leveled the weapon at Zorvek and spoke calmly. "You've got strength, General," Bryce said, "but strength without strategy is just brute force, and brute force doesn't win wars." The final showdown. Zorvek roared in defiance, using his immense strength to climb out of the pit. Bryce backed away, keeping his distance as the general charged once more. This time, Bryce led him toward a narrow ledge overlooking a glowing fissure. The unstable ground cracked and groaned under their combined weight. At the last moment, Bryce dove to the side, rolling to safety as the ledge gave way. Zorvek, unable to stop his momentum, fell toward the fissure. He managed to grab the edge, his claws digging into the rock as he hummed precariously above the molten glow. Bryce approached cautiously, his makeshift spear still in hand. He could have ended it right there, but instead, he extended the spear to Zorvek, offering him a chance to climb back up. The general hesitated, his pride warring with his survival instinct, but eventually he accepted the help. A lesson in survival. As Zorvek stood once more on solid ground, he regarded Bryce with a newfound respect. "You had the opportunity to finish me," the general said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Why didn't you take it?" Bryce shrugged, lowering his spear. "Because this wasn't about killing you. It was about proving that survival isn't just about strength. It's about thinking on your feet, using what you've got, and knowing when to fight and when to back off." The holographic announcer reappeared, declaring Bryce the victor. The crowd, watching from orbit, erupted in applause. Zorvek, though defeated, extended a clawed hand to Bryce in a gesture of respect. "You've earned my admiration, human," the general said. "Perhaps there's more to your kind than I realized." The aftermath. Bryce's victory over General Zorvek solidified his reputation as one of the most resourceful and cunning individuals in the galaxy. For the Galactic Concord, it was another reminder of humanity's unique strengths: adaptability, ingenuity, and an unyielding will to survive. For Bryce, it was just another day in the life of a human who knew how to turn anything into a weapon. As he boarded the ship back to the Concord's capital, Bryce glanced over his shoulder at the desolate moon, a faint smile playing on his lips. The galaxy had learned yet another lesson: never underestimate a human. A galactic lesson in human ingenuity. The story of Captain Bryce's duel with General Zorvek had spread like wildfire across the Galactic Concord. For the first time in recorded history, A human had bested one of the Zithari's most celebrated tacticians in a battle that favored no one but the clever. Bryce's victories were no longer isolated feats. They had become the foundation of a growing legend, a testament to humanity's unparalleled ingenuity. Yet, what came next would solidify Bryce's legacy as a game-changer for interstellar warfare. The challenge of the Kordak Armada. Word of Bryce's exploits reached the ears of the Kordak Empire, a militaristic faction known for their ruthlessness and obsession with domination. Their fleet had terrorized countless star systems, leaving planets stripped of resources and people enslaved. The Galactic Concord had been fighting a losing war against the Kordak for decades, their technological superiority and sheer numbers overwhelming even the most advanced Concord fleets. The Kordak leader, Emperor Vrex, saw Bryce as nothing more than a symbol, a weak species' desperate attempt to claim relevance in the grander scope of the galaxy. To humiliate both Bryce and the Concord, Emperor Vrex issued a bold ultimatum. Bryce would face the Kordak Armada's most elite warriors in a simulated battle. If Bryce could win, the Kordak would agree to a temporary ceasefire. If he lost, the Concord would have to surrender 3 strategic star systems without resistance. The stakes were higher than ever, but Bryce agreed without hesitation. "Let's show them what humans can really do," he said, his grin unwavering. The battlefield. The simulated war zone. The simulated battle was set within an artificial environment that replicated the conditions of a galactic battlefield. Vast asteroid fields, derelict starships, and treacherous nebulae filled the simulated void. The Kordak provided Bryce with a single outdated Concord cruiser, a relic from centuries past. Meanwhile, the Kordak elite warriors, known as the Talon Guard, were given a fleet of state-of-the-art warships, each equipped with the latest weaponry and shielding technology. As the countdown to the battle began, spectators from across the galaxy tuned in to watch. Bryce's reputation as the human arsenal had attracted an audience eager to see whether his ingenuity could overcome impossible odds. Preparing for the impossible, Bryce boarded the ancient cruiser, its controls and systems barely operational. The ship's AI, an antiquated program named LEX, greeted him with a voice that crackled with static. "Captain Bryce, I must inform you that this vessel's combat efficiency is less than optimal." Bryce smirked. "Good thing I'm not relying on optimal. Let's get to work." Before the battle began, Bryce spent hours scavenging the ship's systems and modifying its components. He stripped unnecessary parts to reduce the ship's weight, redirected power from non-essential systems to boost the shields, and even repurposed a malfunctioning drone as a decoy. Using parts from the ship's defunct maintenance bots, he crafted makeshift mines and rigged them to detonate upon proximity. Most importantly, he uploaded a virus into the ship's communication array, designed to infiltrate the Kordak fleet's systems. The virus wouldn't cripple their ships. It would merely delay their responses by milliseconds, enough to disrupt their coordination. "Alex, we're about to turn this flying rust bucket into a weapon they won't see coming," Bryce said, his hands moving with practiced precision. The first engagement. The battle began with the Talon Guard advancing in a tight formation, their ships gliding through the simulated void like predators stalking their prey. Bryce's cruiser, by comparison, looked like a relic dragged out of a museum. The Kordak commanders smirked as they closed in, eager to end the fight quickly. But Bryce had other plans. Using the asteroid field to his advantage, Bryce maneuvered the cruiser into the densest cluster of rocks, forcing the Talon Guard to follow. He activated the mines he had planted earlier, creating a chain reaction that sent debris hurtling through the field. 2 of the Kordak ships were struck, their shields failing as the asteroids tore through their hulls. The audience watching from across the galaxy erupted in astonishment. Bryce's tactics were unconventional, but they were working. The turning point. Guerrilla tactics in space. As the Talon Guard adapted to Bryce's tactics, they began spreading out to encircle them. Bryce, however, used their overconfidence against them. He activated the repurposed drone, sending it hurtling toward the Kordak fleet. The drone emitted a signal that mimicked the energy signature of a high-yield warhead, causing the Kordak ships to scatter in panic. While the Kordak were distracted, Bryce struck. He used the cruiser's limited firepower to disable one of the smaller ships, then hacked into its systems using the virus he had uploaded earlier. The Kordak commanders watched in horror as one of their own vessels turned against them, firing on their formation. Bryce's hit-and-run tactics continued, each maneuver more daring than the last. He used the nebula's electromagnetic interference to mask his movements, launched debris as improvised projectiles, and even redirected the cruiser's coolant system to create a freezing mist that obscured the battlefield. The final gambit. The Talon Guard, now reduced to half their original fleet, regrouped for a final assault. Bryce's cruiser was battered, its shields flickering and its hull barely holding together. But Bryce wasn't done yet. He directed the cruiser toward a derelict Concorde battleship floating at the edge of the battlefield, a relic from a previous war. Using his remaining power reserves, he activated the ship's dormant engines and set it on a collision course with the Kordak flagship. The Talon Guard, realizing too late what was happening, scrambled to intercept the battleship. Bryce used the distraction to execute his final gambit. With precision timing, he piloted his cruiser into the heart of the Kordak formation, releasing a concentrated blast of electromagnetic energy from the ship's reactor. The EMP disabled the remaining Kordak ships, leaving them dead in the water. As the simulated battlefield fell silent, the audience erupted into cheers. Bryce had done the impossible. He had defeated the Kordak armada with a single outdated cruiser. A lesson for the galaxy. Emperor Vrex, though humiliated, honored his word and agreed to a temporary ceasefire. The Galactic Concorde celebrated Bryce as a hero, his tactics studied by military academies across the galaxy. For Bryce, it wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about proving a point. In a broadcast to the Concorde, Bryce addressed the galaxy. Humans don't win because we're the strongest or the smartest. We win because we adapt. We find solutions where others see problems, and when the odds are stacked against us, we don't give up. We get creative. The legacy of human ingenuity. Bryce's victory over the Kordak armada wasn't just a battle. It was a turning point. It showed the galaxy that ingenuity and determination could overcome even the most insurmountable odds. Bryce's name became synonymous with resourcefulness, and humanity's reputation as a force to be reckoned with was cemented. But for Bryce, it was just another day. As he disembarked from the cruiser, greeted by cheers and applause, he smirked and said, "So, what's next?" The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. In the hands of a human, anything could become a weapon. The final stand. The Kordak armada's humiliating defeat at the hands of Captain Bryce had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Yet, for all the respect he had earned, it also painted a target on his back. The Kordak Empire, seething with rage and humiliation, saw Bryce not as a warrior, but as a symbol of rebellion against their dominion. Emperor Vrex declared Bryce the most dangerous enemy of the Kordak and mobilized the full strength of the armada for one purpose: to end him and the Galactic Concorde once and for all. The Concorde, while celebrating Bryce's ingenuity, was woefully unprepared for what was coming. The Kordak brought their full military might to bear, hundreds of ships, including dreadnoughts equipped with experimental weaponry capable of wiping out entire planets. Bryce, however, remained unfazed. As he stood on the bridge of the Concorde flagship, he turned to the gathered fleet commanders. "We've got one chance," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't just about survival. This is about showing the galaxy that ingenuity, courage, and unity can defeat even the greatest of threats. Let's show them what humanity and the Concorde are made of." The enemy arrives. The Kordak armada emerged from hyperspace in a blaze of light, their fleet stretching across the void like a dark storm. At its center was the Eternal Fury, the Kordak's flagship, a behemoth of steel and fire, armed with enough firepower to destroy entire systems. The Concorde's fleet, though dwarfed in size and firepower, held their formation. Bryce had spent days preparing for this moment, working tirelessly with engineers, scientists, and soldiers to create a strategy that leveraged the Concorde's strengths and the Kordak's overconfidence. "Remember," Bryce said to his crew, "we're not fighting them head-on. We're fighting smarter, not harder." The battle begins. As the Kordak fleet advanced, the Concorde ships launched a series of decoys, small, unmanned drones that emitted powerful energy signatures, mimicking the presence of battleships. The Kordak, eager to crush the Concorde's forces, fired upon the decoys, wasting precious ammunition. While the Kordak were distracted, Bryce's team deployed their first surprise: gravity nets. These were massive fields of concentrated gravitational energy, hidden within asteroid clusters. As the Kordak ships moved through the field, the nets activated, dragging dozens of enemy vessels into collisions with asteroids or each other. The battlefield became a chaotic dance of explosions and debris. The human arsenal in action. Despite the early success, the Kordak adapted quickly, regrouping and pressing their advantage. The Eternal Fury unleashed its experimental weapon, a nova cannon, which fired beams of energy capable of vaporizing entire fleets. One beam struck a section of the Concorde ships, obliterating them in an instant. Bryce, however, was ready. Using his reputation as the human arsenal, he had designed an unconventional countermeasure. Working with the Concorde scientists, he had retrofitted civilian cargo ships with pulse emitters, devices that disrupted the Nova Cannon's targeting systems by flooding them with electromagnetic interference. As the Eternal Fury prepared to fire again, the cargo ships activated their emitters. The Nova Cannon's targeting systems went haywire, causing its energy beam to miss its target and strike one of the Kordak's own dreadnoughts. The explosion was visible across the battlefield, and cheers erupted on the Concorde ships. The turning point. Despite their ingenuity, the Concorde fleet was still heavily outnumbered. Bryce knew that to win, they needed to take out the Eternal Fury. He devised a bold plan. A small strike team would infiltrate the Kordak flagship and disable its main reactor. Bryce volunteered to lead the mission himself, taking with him a diverse team of Concorde soldiers, including a Draconian warrior, an Aetheri strategist, and Xylari technician. They boarded a stealth shuttle and navigated through the chaos of the battlefield, slipping past the Kordak's defenses. As they docked with the Eternal Fury, Bryce turned to his team. "Remember, we're not here to fight their entire crew. We're here to hit them where it hurts and get out." The infiltration. The strike team moved swiftly through the flagship's corridors, avoiding patrols and using Bryce's makeshift tools to bypass security systems. At one point, they encountered a locked bulkhead protecting the reactor core. Bryce, with his signature ingenuity, used a small explosive crafted from cleaning supplies and a plasma coil to blow the door open. Inside the reactor chamber, the team faced their greatest challenge: a squad of Kordak elite guards, heavily armored and armed. Bryce used the environment to his advantage, triggering a coolant leak that created a thick, freezing fog. Under the cover of the fog, the team moved like ghosts, disabling the guards one by one. As the last guard fell, Bryce approached the reactor's control panel. He had studied the Kordak's technology extensively and knew exactly how to overload the system. "This is going to buy us some time," he said, setting the reactor to destabilize. "Let's move." The escape and the climax. The team raced back to their shuttle as alarms blared throughout the Eternal Fury. Kordak forces swarmed the corridors, but Bryce's team fought them off with precision and determination. When they finally reached the shuttle, Bryce stayed behind for a moment, using a makeshift EMP device to disable the Kordak's docking clamps and ensure their escape. As the shuttle blasted away from the flagship, the Eternal Fury's reactor reached critical mass. The explosion was cataclysmic, sending shockwaves across the battlefield and crippling the Kordak fleet. The Concorde ships seized the opportunity, pressing their advantage and forcing the Kordak into a full retreat. victory, and legacy. The battle was over. The Concorde had achieved the impossible. They had defeated the Kordak Armada and secured peace for the galaxy. On board the flagship, the crew erupted in cheers, celebrating their survival and Bryce's leadership. Bryce, however, remained humble. As he stood on the bridge, watching the remnants of the Kordak fleet disappear into hyperspace, he turned to the Concorde's commanders. "This wasn't just my victory," he said. "This was all of us working together, using every resource we had. That's what makes us strong, not just as humans, but as a galaxy united." The lesson for the galaxy. Bryce's actions that day became the stuff of legend, taught in military academies and recounted in stories across the stars. He had shown the galaxy that ingenuity, adaptability, and unity could overcome even the most overwhelming odds. The phrase "the human arsenal" became a symbol of creativity and resilience, inspiring generations to come. For Bryce, though, it was just another day. As he prepared for his next adventure, he left the galaxy with one final message: never underestimate what you can do with a little creativity and a whole lot of determination.